Hey, we're here at the Garrett Foster Memorial. Not that we were run out of town by Antifa on a rail. We were there for about, I don't know, we were there for about 45 minutes. They just, when we were walking off, requested that I kill myself. So that's a new, I'll consider it, probably not. Garrett Foster, for people who don't know, the people who these folks were saying justice for Garrett Foster, this was a man who was, of course, at these protests, brought an AK-47 for the protest with intent to use it. A lot of the media won't necessarily show you this, but this is an interview with Garrett Foster before the incident transpired that led to his untimely demise.
Tell us a little bit about your gun again.
It's AK-47.
You feel like you'll need to use it?
Nah, I think I mean, if I use it against the cops, I'm dead. And I think all the people that hate us and, you know, want to say shit to us are too big of pussies to stop and actually do anything about it. So.
Only turns out not everybody was too big of a pussy to do something about it, especially when you aimed your AK-47 at a car point blank range. Now, what these people believe, Antifa, what they want you to believe is this was a guy who was simply out there protesting peacefully, was run over by his car. What we do know is that Sergeant Perry was not running through protesters, right? You can see the damage to his car. The police released Perry and the other shooter from this incident in Austin. Let me show you the clip actually real quick, so it's kind of disturbing, so you have some context.
Everybody back up!
Now, the context that we do know, Perry wasn't ramming protesters. He actually was driving for Uber. He's a sergeant in the military. How do we know? There are receipts. There are receipts that this guy had driven for Uber. He's from Fort Hood. He had come out to Austin because he could pick up some fares, and even had picked up some fares that night, was obeying all the traffic laws as far as we know. Now, granted, you might hear some things that are untrue because it's based on witness testimony, namely witness testimony from people like Antifa and that guy who tried to dress like the cover of Kick-Ass 2 and was wearing a tactical vest jacket that was really just cloth because there was nothing in there. What an asshole, right? So Garrett Foster then approached the vehicle with his AK-47. What's in question? Did he aim it directly at the car? Or did he just motion to roll down your window of Sergeant Perry in the car? So, approached the car, AK-47, and the man in the car, which was being mobbed, defended himself. Now, I want to be clear about something here. When I say that Garrett Foster deserved it, or Garrett Foster, the shooting was justified, is what we created that sign to say, I'm not saying that Garrett Foster deserved to die. I'm not someone who's going to be dancing on the grave, putting out a meme. It's sad, it's a tragedy. That being said, there's a difference between deserving to die, which is committing a crime punishable by death, and forfeiting your right to live. Garrett Foster forfeited his right to live. What do I mean by that? When you put somebody, and this is something that is beyond any question, doesn't matter if Garrett Foster was a veteran, doesn't matter that Perry was a currently active member of the military, doesn't matter what Garrett Foster believed, doesn't matter if Perry, is some rumors circulating around there, didn't like Black Lives Matter. That is entirely irrelevant to the fact that when you approach a car, which is being mobbed by many people, and you can see the damage under the car here, we don't know if some of it was before, some of it was after, all of it before, all of it after, that remains to be seen. But if you swarm a car and you aim an AK-47 at somebody in that car, if you don't believe that a human being in a car with an AK-47 aimed point blank range can defend himself with his firearm, you don't believe that people have the right to defend themselves. That's my question to you. If not, then when? When can somebody defend themselves with a firearm in their car if someone out there has an AK? Do they have to wait till they actually get shot? Is that what you believe the Second Amendment to mean? Is that what you believe stand your ground, or defense laws, self-defense laws, castle doctrine? You let me know. When does it become justified? I think it's justified. I'm not saying that I'm glad that Garrett Foster died. Let's be really clear on that. And let me tell you what I mean by forfeiting your right to live. By the way, that's why I have this open carrying here in Austin. No problem. Now, if I removed this from my holster and aimed it at, let's say, that semi-truck over there, or let's say I didn't even, for the sake of argument, let's use the strongest case that leftists have. I just walked up to that semi-truck right now. Yeah, you can get a shot of that truck. Or I could walk right up to that Expedition or Explorer, walked up with my gun, didn't even maybe aim it at the window, maybe aimed it at the mirror and just said, roll down the window. That might be more of a problem than it being holstered properly. Forfeiting your right to live, this is a perfect example of it. What do I mean by that? If someone is in fear of their life, we talked about this with the knockout game. People get knocked out, they go unconscious in the street. Then they die, they hit their head in the concrete, right? If you mug somebody, I don't know that you just want my wallet. I just know that you're putting a knife to my throat. If you put an AK-47 and you approach a car, and by the way, this person in the car only had one of two choices. Hit the gas, forward, backward, gonna run people over, or at least use a gun which is directional. But let me ask, let's use the same standard here, fear for one's life. The second you put someone in mortal fear of their life, you forfeit your right to live. We've heard this argument about George Floyd. Again, not at all in any way justifying a knee on the neck, but people were saying this guy was in fear of his life, saying that he couldn't breathe. If you watch the full-length footage now, you see that he was saying he couldn't breathe when he was refusing to get into their car. But that was the argument. He was in fear of his life. Well, let me ask you this. Let's use that standard. Who do you believe was more in fear of their life being taken from them? George Floyd, if you go and watch that tape, where he says, please don't shoot me, man. They said, we're not gonna shoot you, please get out of the car. They said, please get into the paddy wagon. He said, man, I'm claustrophobic, which I think is the name for the new mixtape he's dropping. But they said, we need you to get into the car. He said, please stay with me. He said, no, listen, we're gonna stay with you. We're gonna roll down the window and turn on the air. If your argument is that George Floyd was in fear of his life, do you think that maybe Sergeant Perry, with his car being swarmed after we've seen people dragged from their vehicles and beaten within an inch of their life, and a guy with an AK and a mask coming up, might also warrant the right to defend himself? Not a good situation. No heroes or villains. I know this is something that Sergeant Perry is going to have to live with for the rest of his life. But how about we stop glorifying people, especially if we want people to be responsible gun owners, which I encourage. We'll be doing some open carries coming up soon so that hopefully everyone can take part. Let's stop glorifying violent criminals. How many times do we have to wait for the tail of the tape to find out that someone was acting asshole-ish and resulted in an unfortunate situation? No one wants any of these folks to die.